The first thing I heard was the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. It wasn't loud, but in that moment, it felt deafening. My heart skipped a beat, and before I could turn around, I realized I was no longer with the group. I was trapped in that room, and the only person standing there with me was him. It's strange how quickly silence can become heavy. The air itself felt different, almost like the walls were listening. I tried to laugh it off, pretending it was just an accident, but deep inside, I knew something about this moment was not ordinary. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, or the fact that there was no escape unless he allowed it. I kept telling myself that nothing bad was going to happen, that I was overthinking. But sometimes your gut knows what your mind refuses to accept. Every step he took closer made the space between us feel smaller, tighter, and I could feel my pulse racing in my ears. I tried to stay calm, tried to remind myself that I wasn't helpless, but the uncertainty was the hardest part. Because here's the truth, you never really know someone until you're left alone with them. And in that moment, I started to question everything I thought I knew about him. What happened next is something I'll never forget. It changed the way I look at people forever. The door was closed. I was alone with him. And then, I froze for a moment, not knowing whether to move or speak. The room suddenly felt smaller, the quietness pressing in from every side. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and unsteady, as he stood just a few feet away. His eyes stayed fixed on me, calm yet unreadable, and that made it even harder to understand what he was really thinking. I wanted to convince myself that it was nothing, that maybe I was just overreacting, but the longer the seconds stretched, the harder it became to believe that. To understand why this moment was so unsettling, I need to take you back a little. He wasn't a stranger. In fact, I had known him for a while, someone who always seemed trustworthy, someone who blended into the background without ever drawing much attention. He was the kind of person you wouldn't suspect of anything unusual. That's probably why I never thought twice when he spoke to me, when he smiled, or when he offered help in little ways. It all felt normal until now. The truth is, there had always been tiny signs I ignored. A stare that lasted a bit too long, a question that felt strangely personal, a presence that seemed to appear whenever I was alone. At the time, I brushed it off. We all do that, don't we? We tell ourselves not to read too much into things, not to create drama where there isn't any. But when the door shut behind us, all those ignored signs came flooding back into my mind at once. He stepped a little closer, not rushing, almost as if he wanted me to notice every movement. My hands went cold, and my instincts told me to stay alert. There was no phone in my hand, no one to call out to, and the walls seemed to absorb every sound I made. I wondered if anyone even realized I was missing, if anyone outside had noticed that I hadn't come back. He finally spoke, his voice low but steady, and though the words themselves weren't threatening, the way he said them made me uneasy. It was like he knew something I didn't, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. My thoughts raced. What did he really want? Why now, when no one else was around? The strange part is, I couldn't just run. I had to stay, to listen, to figure out what was happening. And with every second that passed, the feeling that something bigger was about to unfold only grew stronger. The door was still shut. I was still alone with him. And whatever was about to happen had only just begun. His words echoed in the room, and though they sounded ordinary on the surface, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden meaning behind them. The way he spoke, slow, careful, like he was measuring every syllable, made me even more uneasy. I nodded along, pretending to understand, but inside, my thoughts were running wild. Why did it feel like he had been waiting for this exact moment? The conflict growing inside me was not just fear, it was doubt. Part of me wanted to believe he was harmless, that this was just a coincidence, but another part of me couldn't ignore the weight of the situation. The locked door, the silence, the closeness, it all told a different story. My instinct screamed that something was off, yet my mind kept trying to calm me down, convincing me I was overthinking. That battle between what I felt and what I wanted to believe was the hardest thing to handle. As I stood there, I remembered fragments of the past. He had always been around, showing up in unexpected places. Sometimes it was at school, sometimes in the neighborhood, sometimes even at moments when I thought I was completely alone. Back then, I dismissed it as coincidence, but now, all those pieces started fitting together like parts of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The realization made me feel even more trapped, as though I had walked into something that had been planned long before this day. The tension thickened when he asked me a question I didn't expect. It wasn't threatening, at least not directly, but it was personal, too personal. The kind of question that made me wonder how much he really knew about me, about my life, about the things I had never told anyone. That was when I understood that being alone with him wasn't just about this one moment. It was about everything leading up to it. I glanced at the door, but it stayed firmly shut. My heartbeat grew louder, and I couldn't help but imagine the people outside, going about their lives, completely unaware of what was happening in here. It was almost like two worlds existed at once. One where everything seemed normal, and this one, hidden behind the closed door, where nothing felt safe anymore. And as his words lingered in the air, I realized the conflict wasn't just about him. It was also about me, about whether I was strong enough to face what was really going on. Because something told me this was only the beginning, and whatever truth was hiding in his silence was far more unsettling than I was ready to hear. The silence between us grew heavier with every second, like an invisible weight pressing down on the room. He hadn't moved much, yet the space felt smaller and tighter with him standing there. My thoughts kept circling back to the same truth. The door was closed, and I was trapped. The way his eyes followed me made me wonder if he already knew how restless I was, if he was enjoying the fact that I couldn't walk away. I tried to steady my breathing, hoping he wouldn't notice how nervous I had become. My palms were damp, my throat dry, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I showed fear, it might give him more power. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Still, the unease refused to leave. His presence was overwhelming, like a shadow that stretched across every corner of the room. He spoke again, this time asking about something from my past. It wasn't a casual question, it was specific, something I hadn't shared with him or anyone else in detail. The fact that he knew unsettled me more than anything. How long had he been watching, listening, waiting? The thought alone made my stomach twist. I wanted to ask him directly, but the words got stuck. Instead, I just stared, pretending to think, while inside my mind screamed for answers. The longer he talked, the clearer it became that this wasn't chance. He had planned this moment. There were no raised voices, no obvious threats, but the calmness in his tone made everything feel more intense. It was like being caught in a game where only one person knew the rules, and I was already losing. I kept glancing at the door, imagining someone suddenly opening it, breaking the tension, but no one came. The world outside felt far away, unreachable. Every sound in the room, the ticking of the clock, the soft creak of the floor, was amplified. It was as though time itself had slowed down, trapping me in this endless moment. At one point, he stepped closer, and I instinctively stepped back. My shoulders brushed against the wall, and that was when I realized there was nowhere else to go. My chest tightened as I tried to keep my composure, but he noticed. He tilted his head slightly, almost like he was studying my reaction, testing how far he could push before I broke. That small gesture made the tension skyrocket. My mind raced through every possibility. Should I speak? Should I stay silent? Should I try to move past him, even if it meant risking what came next? Each choice felt dangerous, and yet standing frozen wasn't safe either. The air was thick with unspoken questions, and the way he lingered in that silence made it unbearable. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something in his expression, a flicker of something deeper, something I couldn't name. Was it anger? Curiosity? Or something else entirely? Whatever it was, it made my heartbeat thunder in my ears. The climax of this encounter was approaching. I could feel it in every nerve of my body. The closed door behind me, his steady gaze in front of me, and the suffocating weight of everything unspoken, it was all building toward a moment I wasn't ready for. Something was about to happen, and once it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Just when I thought the tension couldn't grow any heavier, something shifted in the air. His gaze, steady and almost unblinking, broke for the first time. He looked toward the corner of the room, as if he had heard something I couldn't. That moment of distraction should have given me relief, but instead it made my chest tighten even more. If he wasn't focused on me, then what had caught his attention? I stayed frozen, following his eyes, but the corner was empty. Still, the look on his face unsettled me. It wasn't fear, but recognition, almost as if he knew someone else was here. A chill ran down my spine as a thought crept in. What if we weren't really alone? Before I could process it, he stepped even closer, lowering his voice as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. "You think this is about me," he whispered, "but it's not." His words landed like a thunderclap. Until now, every ounce of my fear had been tied to him, his presence, his silence, the locked door. But now, his voice carried something new, something that suggested there was another layer, a deeper truth I hadn't considered. The conflict inside me twisted into something sharper. If it wasn't about him, then who or what was it about? My eyes darted around the room, suddenly aware of every shadow, every corner, every space that seemed too quiet. The idea that we weren't alone turned my fear into a storm. He leaned back slightly, almost like he was measuring my reaction, waiting for me to put the pieces together. I wanted to demand answers, but the words stayed stuck in my throat. My silence only seemed to encourage him. He gave a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "You've been followed for longer than you realize." Those words shattered everything I thought I understood about the situation. Until now, the closed door and being alone with him felt like the heart of the conflict. But now there was someone or something else. Someone who had been watching me before this moment. Someone who had gone unnoticed until now. My stomach dropped at the realization that the door wasn't just keeping me inside with him, it was also keeping something, or someone out. The tension spiked to unbearable heights. I tried to convince myself that he was lying, twisting the truth to scare me. But deep down, I remembered all the times I had felt watched. The times I brushed off that creeping feeling when walking home at night, or the strange sense that I wasn't as alone as I thought. His words stitched those moments together into a pattern I couldn't ignore. The real question wasn't whether I could trust him. It was whether I could trust anyone at all. My fear of him now collided with a new, even bigger fear. What if he wasn't the only threat? What if the danger was larger than this room? Larger than just us? The air grew heavier, pressing down with an almost unbearable weight. I looked again at the door, this time not just wanting it to open, but terrified of what might be waiting on the other side. And as his eyes locked on mine once more, I understood that the conflict was far from over. In fact, it had only just escalated into something far more dangerous than I was ready to face. My pulse was racing so hard I could feel it in my throat. His words kept circling in my head. "You've been followed for longer than you realize." The room, the silence, the locked door, suddenly it all felt different. I had spent the whole time fearing him, but now the thought that someone else had been there all along terrified me even more. I gathered the courage to ask, my voice shaking, "Who's been following me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped aside, leaving the path to the door clear. My heart leapt, thinking maybe he was finally letting me go, but then he leaned closer and whispered, "Open it and you'll see." For a moment I just stood there, frozen, torn between fear and curiosity. Every instinct told me to stay where I was, but something stronger pushed me forward. With trembling hands, I reached for the handle. The metal felt cold against my skin, and when I turned it, the door gave way with a soft click. The hallway outside was darker than I remembered, shadows stretching unnaturally long across the floor. At first, it looked empty. Then I saw it, a figure at the far end, barely visible, standing completely still. My breath caught in my chest. Whoever it was had been waiting, silently, just beyond the door the entire time. I spun back toward him, my voice cracking. "You knew!" He didn't deny it. Instead, he said quietly, "I wasn't trying to trap you. I was trying to keep you safe in here." His eyes held mine, steady and unflinching, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if he was the danger or my only protection. The figure at the end of the hall began to move, slow but deliberate, each step echoing louder than it should. The air grew heavy again, thick with tension, and my fear reached its peak. I didn't know who to trust anymore, him, who had locked me inside, or the shadow that had been waiting outside. And then came the final twist. As the figure drew closer, I squinted through the dim light, and my stomach dropped. The face I saw wasn't a stranger's. It was someone I knew, someone I never imagined could be part of this. The realization hit me harder than anything else that night. The door was no longer the barrier. The real danger was closer than I had ever expected. And in that instant, I understood. The story wasn't ending here. It was only shifting into something even darker. The moment I recognized the face in the hallway, my entire world tilted. It wasn't a stranger, not some unknown threat lurking in the dark. It was someone I had trusted for years. That realization stung more than the fear itself. All the little moments I had brushed aside, all the uneasy feelings I had ignored, now made perfect sense. The following, the strange questions, the unexplained appearances, they weren't accidents. They had been building up to this. I turned back toward him, the one who had locked me inside, and for the first time, I understood why he had done it. He hadn't been my enemy. He had been keeping me from stepping into the real danger waiting just outside. The silence, the uneasy stares, even his strange behavior, it had all been his way of trying to protect me without revealing too much. My fear of him had blinded me from seeing the bigger picture. The figure in the hall stopped moving, standing still once again, almost as if they knew I had pieced the truth together. My hands shook, but my mind was suddenly clearer. The danger had been close all along, disguised as someone I thought I could rely on. And maybe that was the most terrifying part of it all, that sometimes the people who smile the brightest hide the darkest secrets. He placed a hand lightly on the door, pushing it closed once more. This time, I didn't resist. The sharp sound of the latch felt final, but not in the same suffocating way as before. It was a barrier, yes, but now it was one that gave me a strange kind of relief. As the night wore on, I thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the conflict, the confusion, it all led me to one truth. You can never really know someone no matter how familiar they seem. The closed door wasn't just a physical thing. It was a reminder of boundaries, of trust, of instincts we should never ignore. Looking back now, I realize the experience changed me forever. It taught me to listen to that small voice inside, the one we often silence with reason or excuses. It taught me that protection doesn't always look gentle, and that danger can come from the most unexpected places. The door closed that night, and yes, I was left shaken. But I walked away with something even more powerful than fear, clarity. And that clarity is what I carry with me now, every time I face the unknown. Because sometimes, the scariest stories aren't about strangers at all, they're about the people we thought we knew best.